So welcome to today's session. I'm coming today. I'm going to talk to you guys about NX Sketch and really it's about the new sketch, and it's really what we like to call day one topics. It's things really that everyone should know the first day when they really use the sketch and some of the differences between legacy sketching and the new sketch. Over the next 30 minutes or so, we're going to cover what the solver does, how relations are found, what about dimensions, then we're going to do a couple of 3 demos at the end, one on remote finding and a couple other just day one tips. Then I'm going to create a complete sketch, and after I complete that complete sketch, I'm going to go back and add some design intent onto it. Like I said, I am Scott Felber. I am with the NX product marketing team. I'm based here in the Midwest. If you want to learn more about NX, you can follow me either on LinkedIn or on Twitter. I do post quite a few things about NX and other Siemens Accelerator things, but mostly NX. So without further ado, let's get into the new sketch, right? The biggest thing to remember about the new sketch is the new sketch was really designed to take away the need for the users to really add what we call relations today, but are traditionally known as constraints, to the sketch. The one thing to remember is the third bullet here is that dimensions are stronger than relations. And I will show that a little bit when I do some demos a little bit later. But the one thing to remember is a lot of people ask, how can I figure out what's going on in my sketch, what relations are there? Really, whenever you go to make a change, the solver solves the entire sketch and figures out what it needs to add to that sketch to make it so you can do the change you want to do. So with that being said, the productivity tip is there's shake and break to shake curves. I'll show that a little bit. I'll probably show that one too in a little bit. But that's about curves and dimensions. You create your curves, you add your dimensions. Traditional sketching is add your curves, add your constraints, add your dimensions. We're taking that third step away from the end user and just doing it for you. The next one about relations, I said in the last one, relations do not exist as objects in a sketch. They are found at time of change. They're found and thus they cannot cause conflict, and they are only needed for the current edit as displayed. It doesn't go find other things. The next thing I'll talk about later is the make command, which is up on the top. And I'll show it too in the demos. But the make command, what it really does, make moves to commands. It'll move those commands and make them perpendicular, tangent, equal length, whatever. But when it does that, it doesn't apply what you would traditionally consider a constraint to it. What it does, it makes those two curves, let's say perpendicular, so later on the solver can find that perpendicularity. It doesn't create perpendicularity, it makes it so the solver can find it. And you can relax dimensions while you're doing your designs and trying to get your thing just right. But the big tip to remember here is dimensions are stronger than relations. That's one thing as we've been going around doing this. A little background, I've been involved with the sketch before it was released, going way back to when we first started doing this with usability studies with customers and colleges and a whole bunch of stuff. So I'm well versed in what areas people kind of need a little bit of reminder, and that's the biggest thing we try to remember all the time now is dimensions are stronger than relations. If you change a dimension, it will break some relations that it found to make that change if needed. Dimensions, you just pick the lines you want to do, and it'll dimension them. You can select either side to move. There's arrows. You can create expressions by default. If you just type numbers in, you do not get expressions to access outside of the sketcher. The reason for that is over time we have found out that most people do not need all of their dimensions as expressions in the expression subsystem. So we're trying to clean up the expression subsystem to make it easier for it to use. But you can create expressions either after the fact or just by typing in an equals when you do something. The status of the sketch is always shown down in the bottom in your queue line. They'll tell you sketch is fully defined or not. But there's another nice thing in here too. When you have find movable turned on, which is turned on by default, is the curves will change colors. I have mine set to the default colors, which are black for fully defined and brown for movable. Some people have changed, like in this example here, they made their movable curves pink, so they're easier to stand out, and that's up to you. But I try to use NX as much out of the box as possible. So you have the same day one experience that you saw here today. And parametric sketches, I already talked about this. Remember, we will add the parameters only as needed for access outside the sketch. I'll show that a little bit. We'll get later on when I add my design intent to my very last sketch. Then I'm going to control just a few things from outside the sketch, and most of the things inside just will work based on the scheme I come up with. And the last one is a new way of thinking. There's one here when you want to use external geometry, like in this instance, I may have a sketch on his face and I want to use those edges to measure to. They have kind of the orange line onto them. There is an include command. Now that's available in Sketch. And when you hit include, it will let you go pick edges and points and other things to bring into the sketch as reference. The key being as reference. As you see there, you get a dashed line. And by being a reference, what that allows it to do, it will not participate in revolves and extrudes and other things you traditionally do with a sketch. You can, on the fly, pick those edges. By default, the selection intent for a sketch is select to current sketch only, because especially with newer users, sometimes you would be picking stuff and you'd pick stuff 3-4 levels deep, an edge in the background that you really don't want. It makes it very hard to debug your sketch and do other things. But there is project, intersection, and intersection point. They're all supported still. But include is kind of the way, if you think about it, I come into a sketch, I start it. I know I'm going to need this edge, and this edge, so I right away say include, I bring those in, then I start sketching out my shape. So instead of everyone not coming here for PowerPoint all day, what we're going to do is we're going to get into the demos. And like I said, I'll just go through a few pictures here. First, I'm going to talk about some of the basics I just talked about and some of those things. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a sketch from scratch. And if you remember this picture right here, because this is the sketch I'm going to create from scratch like this. And then when I'm done creating this sketch, I'm going to go ahead and add some design intent onto it to be able to control it from outside the sketch environment and do other things with it. So I think with that, I'm going to hop over to NX. All right, I have my NX session here. I just have an empty part file, so I'm going to go ahead and create a sketch. And I'll just put it up there. Okay, so I'm going to show you a few of the things first. And the top here's what we talked about is the make toolbar. It does not create relations. What it does, it moves the geometry into position so the solver can find it later. The show movable is turned on by default. And the one I talked about here, when people first do it, there's this one here. It's where is it going to pick my entities if I'm picking outside the sketch? By default, it's within active sketch only, but there is options to do within the work part or within an entire assembly. You can switch that at any point. I'm going to leave it to the default for now. First thing, I'm just going to draw a line here. When you draw a line, it's brown because it's not fully defined. And if I pick a line and just drag it around, it will always drag it parallel to what you have when you pick up and drag a line. Okay, you can see if I pick, and if I pick it again, because it's not vertical or horizontal, it'll give me options to dimension that line. I could pick one of those dimensions now and use it, but I'm not. But the other thing is to think about how geometry works. So I said if I pick the line and hold down, I can drag it around. If I pick the endpoint and drag, I don't get parallel because of a point I can pivot around the other spot. So what you pick does matter with the new sketch when you're kind of creating stuff to get it to kind of work. What I wanted to show first is kind of how some of the make commands work and a few of the other things. So now I have these two lines right here. And what I want to do is I really want to make those two lines, let's say perpendicular. So I can go up here now and say perpendicular. And if you do it that way, you're going to get the menus, which is motion curve to stationary curve. And that's how it always works. I'm going to do it this time with the menus. So this is the one I want to move to that one. I say, okay. What it did is it didn't create a relation like you consider today in Legacy. What it did is it made them perpendicular. So now when I drag that, you can see it holds that perpendicularity. If I click it here, if I dimension this one, now when I dimension it, you see this perpendicular sign. It's saying I found that perpendicularity with a dimension, which is different than dragging. So as I move it, it will keep those two curves perpendicular from there. I can do the same here. I can go ahead and make this one now. Just pick that dimension. I'm not going to round them up. Another thing to notice with the new sketch, let's do this, is if I hit my control key and my up or down arrows like I do in Microsoft products, I can make my numbers bigger, and I'll make them bigger for you guys to be able to see. If you ever come across a dimension as you add it and it has an approximate sign, all that's telling you is it's not displaying all the digits it has on the screen. Like the first one, I just drew to 127 when I dragged it around. This one's about 90.8. If I double click on it, you'll see the number here. It's 90.8289621. So it's about 90.8. So just so you know that too. That gives you an idea. If you want to maybe round that one off to 90, I can just put it in and go 90. But now they're both perpendicular. So when I pick either one, the perpendicular holds. So if I drag it now, it drags the whole thing because dimensions are stronger than relations. If you remember when I had this one not here, and I drag this line around, the 90 line moves because the 90 is not locking it down. So once again, it does kind of matter what you have as geometry. What I'm gonna do is, before I do the other thing I'm gonna do one here. I'm gonna just draw a rectangle. You notice now you get this shading by default that says you have a airtight in 2D doesn't make sense, but what you have is a set of curves that are connected endpoint to endpoint that they don't overlap or anything. So if I pick any of these curves now, I can just drag them around. Again, I said before, if I pick the endpoint, it's saying I'll pick that endpoint, but now you have vertical and horizontal found because they're blue, right? So if I drag the endpoint like before, it honors that vertical and horizontal. If I pick that endpoint again, let's say I wanted to move this line off of horizontal, I can, before I dimension, I can relax it by picking it. It turns pink, and now I can drag that up, and it'll honor that vertical distance. The other one, because dimensions are stronger in relations, is with most legacy sketchers, if I do this and make this one, let's make it 100, excuse me. If I cough a little bit, I apologize, because I woke up this morning with a sore throat, which I didn't have last night when I went to bed. So if I pick this one out to change it, it's saying you can change that. But for me to change that 100, because dimensions are stronger in relations, I need to relax a relation. So if I go up here and pick this one, it says I'm going to relax the top one. If I pick the bottom one to switch, I'm going to pick that one. So if I go back up here to the top and just pick it, now I can do that. So again, it's kind of knowing what's going on, excuse me, and what you're trying to accomplish by it. So let me do this and delete all these. In the interest of time. The other thing is I talked about shake and break. If I want to break these two lines apart, I pick this, I hold down on this endpoint, I shake it 3 times on the mouse. 1, 2, 3. It comes off. It broke the horizontal, which is fine. So what I'll talk about now is make. So if I go ahead now, and again, like this is perpendicular is L. So if I say move this line to this line, I make them perpendicular, which is L. Now they're perpendicular. So if I drag this now, it stays perpendicular. And if I drag this, but it's dragging it parallel, so it will stay perpendicular. They're not really perpendicular just yet, because this is what's called a remote situation. And there's certain relations that need, today they need remote, how do I say it? It's kind of easy to just put the remoteness on it by doing what I like to call, was one thing I didn't do a lot of with the legacy that I do now, is I create more reference curves. So if I do that, it is perpendicular. If I go ahead and just click it onto that line, and I pick this line and say, make it reference. Now, if I pick that, you'll see that honors that perpendicular. Perpendicular ones for remote finding need to be connected. If you stay tuned, early next year, there may be some new news coming on that ability to find these remote relations without you having to do this. But if you're sketching today, this is the situation that we have today. This is kind of the same thing as before. So if I go ahead now and move this one around a little bit, I pull it off. They kind of were remote. I mean, they're kind of connected, but now they're not connected perpendicular like we had them, right? So I can do this now, and I can go back here. I could create another line that I actually want those two lines to be perpendicular all the time, work out into reference, and then everything is perpendicular when I do it and stuff. So I don't think that is 90, so it is perpendicular. So I got all that. So I'm just going to go ahead now, and I'm just going to delete all these curves. The next thing I want to do is I want to go back, and I'll show you guys real quick again. This shape right here. This is the shape that I'm now going to draw out in probably the next 8 to 10 minutes with these dimensions on it, make it all fully defined, get the color showing and other stuff, and kind of stuff you can do. And then, like I said, then I will add my design intent to it after the fact. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start with a couple of the circles that I had down on the bottom. So I want the first circle right here at the sketch origin. I want that one to be 25. If I put in a value, I get it. And I'm going to make that one 25 right there. And then, I should put the other one into. I need this one up here to be, I believe, 60. Okay. So I have my first 3 circles. clean my display a little bit. I said, for your sake, I'm going to make the numbers a little bit bigger so you guys can kind of see what's going on. If you notice now, it says on my bottom, it says sketch is partially defined with 2 movable curves. And because I have show movable turned on, you can see these ones here are brown. So what I need to do is define the locations and sizes of all these things to make them turn black and make them fully defined. If you remember, I typed in 25 on this one. This one does not have a dimension, but if I click on this one, you see here you get this equal sign. It is equal radius with the other one because it found equal radius. It will do that. But what I want to do is I want to take from that center point to that center point. I want to put a dimension in there between them. If you look now, that made that circle fully defined. I don't need it because it knows it's equal radius. I didn't put that on there. It just found it. And I want to create the location off the y-axis for this distance. And let's just say this distance. And if we look now, my sketch is fully defined because really I have 3 circles in space that are defined by their diameters and their locations are fully defined. These ones are fully defined because they're on the horizontal axis of the sketch. This one's defined because I have the locations of where the center point is along with the diameter. Now what I want to do is I just want to kind of create my outline with arcs, and I want one arc to go from point on curve there to point on curve there. You can see that ends tangent. Getting stuff to be tangent sometimes can be a little tricky. What you're doing, that's where the make command comes in. I'm going to pick this line and put it on there. And if you remember what the shape looked like, there's a curve that goes like that. And then there's a curve that goes like that. And the last one is, let me just pick this down a little bit. Need an arc that goes from this endpoint onto that curve to about there. So now I have my general shape, my outline shape. What I want to do is I want to use the quick trim, which I use a lot of hotkeys. What's up on the top right here, trim is T. So I'm just going to say, just trim those lines off. And you see now my 3 arcs are all, and lines are all brown. They're not fully defined. What I'm going to do is, if I go up here and look at tangent, is O. So all I'm going to do is I want to say make this, that. Here's the tangent line right here. That little line says that one's tangent. So I want to move that one, make them tangent. This one is not tangent anywhere, so I'm going to make it tangent to there. And to the axis. So that one's tangent. Now that one being tangent made it fully defined. And I want to make this one to there, tangent. And I want to make sure this and that are tangent. Yes, go ahead, move the curves you need to. So now all my tangency is defined, but I need to go ahead because dimensions are starting in relation, I need to dimension the stuff I don't have. So the first thing I want to do is I want to dimension this one, make it 30. Now it's fully defined. I'm going to go ahead and find this angle here at 30 degrees. I'm going to define the height from here to here at 40. And I need this dimension right here. I believe these numbers are kind of big, but you guys can see them all. Now my sketch is fully defined. But if we remember my picture, this one's kind of rounded off right here. So what I want to do is I just want to fill that off to a value of 30 like the other ones. And I can just pencil over it as my dimension. Oop, no, don't do that. And move my dimension over. And my sketch is still fully defined. So far what I'm doing is I'm building my sketch. If you need to make the numbers bigger or smaller, again, it was control up arrow, down arrow. So now I have all of my sketch fully defined. So what I want to do now is I want to go ahead and create all those offsets I had. So what I want to do is I want to go ahead here and create the offset curve. And I want to create the first one here. I want to make that one an offset of 10. Because these are all different than this one. I'm going to offset a distance of 5. And then I need to offset all around here a distance of 7. Excuse me again. So I have all my offset curves done. But I need to define the values. But before I do that, I want to go ahead and I want to trim away. Again, T was quick for trim. I want to go ahead and trim away all these unnecessary geometry. So I need to trim all this. And then I need to trim all that. And I want to trim all those. Okay, and everything's trimmed up. Again, these I can now leave these diagrams. What I want to do now is I need to go ahead and dimension out some of the values here for my offsets. This one I'm just going to make a radius value, even though it's an offset. I'll make it 40. This one down here, I offset to a value of 5, so I picked the two curves. I get the dimension right here. Make that one 5. And this one from here to here, because all the other curves are connected, I'm just going to make that 7. Now my sketch, once again, is fully defined, because all my curves are black, and I'm just doing this by adding dimensions. I have not once added any kind of relationship or constraint to any of these. I did a few makes to get the things I needed perpendicular to be perpendicular. So now all I need to do is just add in my last few circles that I had. I'm going to put one here at 16, not 6. I'll change it a bit. Notice I changed both of them because I found those two to be equal radius, like we talked about when we started. Now my sketch still is fully defined. So now I have a fully defined sketch, but this one has no expressions on it. So what I want to do now is I want to go ahead and capture some design intent. I could have at any point, what I'll do real quick is I will take this one, and I'm just going to delete this one. You notice now everything's, if I go back here and I'll make this to here, if I pick this value, if I say equals 40, oops, I don't want to do that. You see it creates an expression for it, a P0, because it's the first one, but that's not the one I want to be my expression, so I'm going to put it back to just 40. But you can see my sketch works the way I want it now. This one goes up and down the way I want. This one moves in and out the way I want. And this one moves up and down the way I want. Now, my design intent says I always want this spine piece here to always be lined up with this midpoint of this circle. I could make these two expressions 40, right? That's one way to do it because that's the distance from there and that's the same distance. If I go ahead and I'll delete that 40, you see my sketch now is underdefined again. What I want to do is I want to create a reference line that goes from this endpoint to connect it to the arc center. And if I make that reference, right there, my sketch is still fully defined. The one thing I like about reference lines, and I've been a long time user, is I used to, like I said to you guys earlier, I never created reference lines. But to me, after going through quite a bit of this, reference lines now kind of help you self-document the design where people don't have to go look for relations. You can just see that line is there, and it's going to be, they are connected. So what I want to do now is if you want to take another value and create an expression, you don't have to delete it right here. You can say add or remove expression. So now that one's P0. And I can go here and say this one too, add or remove expression. That one's P1. So now I can create these two values from outside the sketch. So let me just show you that and I'll come back in. If I go now to my sketch down here to my details panel, I have 40 and 40. So I could change the values from here. I can make that 35. My sketch updates if you saw it. I'm going to undo that because what I really wanted to do is I really want these 40s to all be equal with this distance here. That's just my design intent. So with this one, instead of being equal to 40, I'm going to make it equal to P0. Now it's going to control this, and this all with this one expression. So if I go out, and I did need to create that second expression, obviously, because to tie the two together, I need to do it as an expression. Come on. So if I go back now to my details, if I go ahead and make this say 50, my sketch updates. If I make it 35, my sketch updates. That's the shape I wanted for my sketch. So now I could just finish up my design task today. Go ahead and extrude this. I think a value of 100 is a little much. Make it 10. And with that, I have my part. I have my design intent on it, and I'm all done. So I think with that being said, that was capturing my design intent. I know we're on here with Saratech today, and they do help you guys a lot because, right, I work for Siemens. But also there is an NX design community that's available to everybody who's our customers or not our customers. You can lurk, you can go there, you can join the design community, you can look at it. The only thing we ask is if you want to ask questions or put replies, we just need an email. We don't even know if you're a customer. So it's a great place to go. I'll say one other quick thing is if you are not using the new Sketch today or you're not in a version that supports the new Sketch, there is options to still use legacy Sketch. You can reach out to Saratech, they know how to do that. What we're telling everybody is make sure you have a plan of how to use legacy Sketch. The one thing I didn't show you is when you come into the Sketch the first time, which I'll do right now real quick, if you hit the F1 key, which is help, there's all these videos. There's ones here that are new to Sketch. These are all short, 10 to 30 second videos. Then there's ones for scene actions. How do I create dimensions, drag curves, move curves, shake and break? There's one here for every command in the Sketch. It goes out. And then there's this new set here that we've started putting in a couple of versions ago. After we've been talking to a lot of customers, we have longer videos, anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes that we're calling legacy users. These videos are, I will say they're not version dependent, but we're not going back and putting them in the older versions of NX. What we're doing is we are putting them in the latest version of NX when we create a new one. And we're also putting them on the Siemens PLM software NX on YouTube on the NX channel. A lot of those can be found there too. So yeah, I want to thank everybody for attending today too. So you guys all have a great day.
Thanks for checking out our channel. If you like what you saw, make sure to like and subscribe down below so you don't miss out on any new videos. Follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter for the latest engineering news and information. And to see all of our upcoming events, please visit our website at saratech.com/events.